Hello everybody, welcome back to another I Enjoy Stuff video. Now in this one, hopefully it should be exciting. So what we're doing is we're ranking every single team's performance at the World Cup. First up, we of course have the first host nation, and probably the biggest host nation considering all the attention it got, especially with the Balogun scandal and things like that, is the USA. Now, I feel like the USA, they started off well. I mean, topping a group was impressive, especially a group with Turkey in it, though we will get on to how bad they were in a minute. I personally feel like even though the USA got past Bosnia, I feel like Bosnia were a team that they were probably expected to get past. So what I am going to say is, we'll say the USA promised a lot more than they gave. And it's a difficult decision. I'd put them between B and C, really. I think, to be kind, I'll put them in B. Now, up next, Mexico. They topped the group 9 points, right? Brilliant start. Didn't concede a single goal in that time. So, they get to the round of 32. They go through in the round of 32 and they get to the round of 16 where they come up against England. They gave England a close game. They gave us a run for our money, but in the end we managed to get past them. Mexico, I feel like, had a great team and they had a great performance. I feel like if I put them in B though, I'll have to move USA down to C. Personally, because I feel like Mexico had a better tournament than the USA. Actually, I'll put them both in B, but Mexico's slightly higher in B, in my opinion. By the way, I've not really done any ratings before, so I hope it doesn't. I'm probably gonna look rubbish when I do this. Up next, Canada. Right, Canada in the FIFA rankings are the lowest ranking out of the 3 host nations, and the fact that they managed to equally get to the round of 16 and do well in the group. And a group with a couple of decent teams as well, in like Bosnia and Switzerland, albeit Bosnia aren't brilliant, but Switzerland are a top class team and they got to the quarters. So genuinely, I think Canada had a good performance this World Cup. I think they were expected to finish lower than they did. Spain, I don't think loads of people expected them to win the tournament. They had a stacked team, don't get me wrong, but I feel like how they performed and how they got through, even if they'd maybe got a couple of draws against Cape Verde and, struggled against Uruguay, I feel like S tier is only fair for the winning team. Up next, Argentina. Now, Argentina, in my opinion, if it comes to general performance and statistical performance, you'd have to give them the S as well, but I'm not giving Argentina S because, in my opinion, one, I feel like because they were defending champions, they'd look to go on and do a bit more than they did, even though they did get to the final. And I feel like a lot of that on the way to the final was very controversial, and I feel like personally that tarnishes them, and I'm debating between A and B. But I will put them in A for the sake of, they did get to the final technically. France. Now, France were looking really good up to the semi-finals when they got knocked out by Spain. That game showed France's weakness, and it showed where they were going wrong. They arguably had the best team in the whole tournament, and the fact that they couldn't get further was kind of a bit concerning. In my opinion, I'm gonna go C for controversial, because personally I feel like I'd put them in the low end of B or C, but I'm gonna put them in C purely because losing that third place match as well really did show their weaknesses. England, right? I'm gonna cut to the chase. There's not gonna be bias on this one because, in my opinion, I don't think England played as well as they should have. That game against Argentina promised so much, and yet it gave so little. But third place is undeniable, and I'd give them A tier for that. Best finish in 60 years, even though we should have really gone on for more. Right, Brazil. Brazil have had a poor World Cup, a very poor World Cup. Going out in the round of 16 to Norway, albeit Norway were a great team, Brazil on paper, were still beating Norway 100%. They were only managing to edge through Japan, and they really struggled in the group as well, especially against Morocco. They managed to beat Scotland and Haiti fine, but the fact that they were struggling against Morocco just shows how much they've dropped off. Don't get me wrong, Morocco are a great team, but Brazil should have really been looking to win that. So I'm debating between C and D, but I feel like they're getting to the low end of C for not getting grouped. Right, up next, Portugal. Portugal were another team that promised so much. That midfield was called the best in the world just over a month ago. And look what they brought. They couldn't even top the group, for starters. They drew to DR Congo. They beat Uzbekistan, but it is Uzbekistan. And they drew to Colombia, who would get knocked out in the round of 16. The same round as them. And in my opinion, they didn't show enough. Personally, I feel like they get C as well, but the low end of C. Right, the Netherlands. Personally, I feel sorry for the Netherlands. They had a tough match against Morocco in the round of 32. They did have a tough one in Morocco, but I've still favoured them quite a bit. And I think they were, for some people, the actual favourites to go on really far. And to be honest, I can't even give them B for that. Have to go and see. Right, up next we have Belgium. Belgium, I had very little hopes against Senegal, but when they started to turn it on against Senegal and they made the comeback of dreams, I feel like they went on a roll after that, because then they beat the USA 4-1 and they held Spain 1-1 until the 87th minute. And the only reason why they fell was because of a small mistake. So I feel like Belgium did impressively, and we knew they had a wash team for the start as well. So I can't give them S, no I can't, but I'll give them A. Germany. Now Germany struggled in the group, we saw it against Ecuador, and they just had no will to win the game against Paraguay. And personally, that gives them a D. Out in the round of 32 to a Paraguay team that weren't even incredibly promising. They defended well, but Germany should have found a way. The Jonathan Tah goal was controversial, but now Croatia. It's a shame to see them go out so soon, especially with how dominant they were for parts of the game against, of course, Portugal. But I cannot realistically give them a high score for that. I'd give them C because they came up against a tough Portugal side, but I feel like we still expected better from them, even if their team was massively ageing. Right, Morocco. I feel like after the semi-finals last time, Morocco had a lot expected of them. And they did well in the group, to be fair to them. And they managed to get through to the round of 16. And that... I meant the quarterfinals. And that is where they fell to France. I feel like it was a little bit of an embarrassing result that they didn't try, but I can completely understand why they still wouldn't have got past France. But in my opinion, it wasn't an overachieving World Cup for them, but it also wasn't underachieving. So that's the basis of how we're working it. Is it just normal, not overachieving or underachieving? Is it below slightly, or is it fully below, or is it above slightly, or fully above? Right. Colombia. Now, I feel like Colombia came into a team with promise, 100%. They went out in the round of 16. But in my opinion, their performance in the group alone deserves an A. Like, I'm impressed with that group. And then they managed to clean past Ghana. And they held on to Switzerland for so long. And in the end, the Swiss team had to be as precise as possible to stop them from winning. Up next, Uruguay, D. No question. They had a lot expected of them, with the likes of Federico Valverde and more. In my opinion, I think they should have at least got to the round of 16, and it's disappointing that they couldn't even make it out the group. A group, may I add, with Cape Verde, and a group with Cape Verde and Saudi Arabia in it. Quite surprising that they couldn't do anything against those two teams. A rough game against Saudi Arabia and a really rough game against Cape Verde. So, in my opinion, I feel like the fact that they weren't able to scrape past them teams just shows the disadvantages that they had. They had two rough games and they had a poor one against Spain as well. Although, in my opinion, losing 1-0 to Spain isn't awful. Only managing to get 2 points was awful, and that's what puts them in D. Meanwhile, Switzerland, I feel like Switzerland punched a little bit above their weight in this. I feel like because they had no Jan Sommer, no Sheridan Shaqiri, people thought they'd lost their magic. But I feel like they can be wagered in A. I feel like that is a valid ranking because of they overperformed, and in my opinion, the way they held off Argentina for so long until, of course, extra time was incredibly impressive as well. Up next, we have Japan. Now, Japan, I feel like they underperformed. Although they did get pipped to it by Brazil, I feel like they had times in the group where they were promising and they had times in the group where they were questionable. And going out in the round of 32 to Brazil, it just cost them. But I don't feel like they were awful. I just feel like they weren't good enough. Senegal. A team that promised so much more than they delivered. The fact that they couldn't hold on against Belgium for the final 7 minutes of the game was a clear sign that they've got improvements to make. They were incredibly erratic at the dying parts of that game, to the point where I feel like as much as they managed to go through third in the group, in a difficult group as well, may I add, they didn't have the spark to make it there. Up next, we have Iran. Now, in my opinion, I don't think people expected loads of Iran, and they were in a somewhat more difficult group. They had Belgium in their group, for instance. The fact that they made such a struggle out of that is kind of surprising from a team that actually is okay. But I can't say they badly underperformed because I don't think people expected loads of them, but they did get grouped. South Korea, underperformers. They had a top-notch team with the likes of Kim Min-jae and more. And I feel like the fact that they couldn't advance further than they did, and that they struggled so much in the group and got pipped by a South Africa side that didn't really seem particularly prominent, was a little bit surprising, and it is a shock for them. The manager actually went into investigation for their results, and I mean, so would I to that manager, because I feel like they lost it a bit. The team and the manager both lost it a bit, and the way they weren't able to be controlled was disappointing. Same thing with Bielsa at Uruguay. Right, up next we have Ecuador. Ecuador I'm going to put in C, because they did do well in the group, admittedly. Especially with their performance as well against Germany, may I add. But out in the round of 32, it was kind of routine for Mexico. It did feel routine. I mean, everybody was saying Mexico were going through, and I mean, fair enough. C is probably valid because they could have gotten to like the round of 16 or something. They had a promising team with like some Moises Caicedo and William Pacho. Right, up next we have Austria. Now, Austria, getting out of that group, for starters, was a good start. And then they coming up against Spain was going to be a tough one for them. I mean, we didn't expect a lot from Austria against Spain. I feel like the draw could be classified as unkind to them. But personally, they got out of the group, they did a solid job, but not advancing past the round of 32. Even though it was difficult, I can only give them B. Australia. Now, Australia. They punched massively above their weight. In terms of the group they got through. I'm surprised they got through in a group with Paraguay, Turkey and the USA. I feel like the most they could do is probably finish third. But they did well, and they did punch above their weight in that group. Going out to Egypt, a bit soon you could say, but I feel like in general they had a stronger tournament than expected, and they did punch above their weight. Up next, we have Norway. Now, I feel like Norway were always expected to be somewhat of a dark horse, but to get to the quarterfinals and then lose to England in such a tight game, admittedly, to the point where we were actually scared they were going to do something against us. I feel like that's incredibly commendable. And right, up next we have Panama. I feel like in a group with Ghana, Croatia and England, I feel like Panama always knew secretly they were going to get grouped. I can't say they did badly, but I can't say they did well. They were quite poor. B tier. Actually, no, C, because they couldn't even get a point. Right, up next we have Egypt. Egypt, I feel like have had an S tier tournament, managing to get to round 16 and then going out to Argentina after leading 2-0 against Argentina. If all games ended in the 70th minute, they'd have been to the quarters or even further. Well, considering they were up against Switzerland, considering they would be up against Switzerland, they could genuinely give Switzerland a game. And for that, I feel like they had a great performing World Cup, in my opinion. Algeria up next. Getting to around the 32 is an achievement. They did struggle against Switzerland. They got out of a relatively difficult group with the likes of Austria and Argentina, but I feel like they were always favourites to still get through in some way, shape or form, and they have quite a few young talents in their team as well. So I don't feel like they punched well above their weight, so I'll put them in B. Right, up next, Scotland. They got 3 points on the board. Commendable for them. They're in a group with Brazil, Morocco and Haiti, and finishing third is acceptable in a group like that. Now, you've got to look at scenarios here. I'm not going to give them the favour, but I will give them B tier. Lower down in B tier, though. Right, up next, we have Paraguay. Now, Paraguay, I don't feel like I can give them S tier because of how disgusting they were against France. But managing to get through against that Germany team, and excellently as well. Can I just say, if it was only Paraguay's goalkeeper in here, if there was a tier S++++++, I'd put him in there. But we're not ranking goalkeepers, we're ranking teams here. And that's where I put them. Right, Tunisia. I don't think we expected much from them, but they did somewhat have a team that they could put out. I'm going to give them C because the amount of pummelings they got in that group with Japan, the Netherlands and Sweden was rough to watch. And here we have Ivory Coast. Not Ireland because they didn't qualify. Ivory Coast. They got into a tough round of 32 match, to be fair, against, of course, Norway. They got through a group, but that's about as much as they did, really. They didn't shock anybody, and I will put them in B tier for that reason. Oh, actually, though, to be fair, they did have quite a lot of talent in the team that should have gone further, like Amad Diallo and Yan Diamande. So probably put them in C purely because we expected a bit more. But then again, they were nicks at the end against Norway. Right, up next we have Uzbekistan. Their first tournament, I feel like they had Shomurodov and Kusanov. That's pretty much where they were gone. C tier. they didn't exactly have any moments where I was like, ooh, Uzbekistan. Ooh, they could do something. Up next, Qatar, the former hosts of the World Cup. I don't think we expected much from them. In a group with the likes of Canada and Belgium, yeah, I don't think we really. And Bosnia as well. I could have fancied them actually coming close against Bosnia. They got a point out of it, but I'll put them in C. Up next, we have Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, personally, don't have a brilliant team, but they probably could have done more than they ended up doing. So it's a bit of a shame that they didn't. And I'll put in C. Right, South Africa, in my opinion, had a good tournament. They got out of a group that they really weren't favoured for, and for that alone they get into A. But also holding off Canada for 92 minutes until Eustachio scored. Impressive stuff. Right, up next we have Jordan. Jordan in a group with Algeria, Austria and Argentina. I really didn't expect them to do much. And for that reason, I don't think anyone expected them to do much. Can't even give them C because they weren't even expected to get a point, really. Up next, Cape Verde. Punched well above their weight out in the round of 32. But the performance that they had, people will say, put them in S tier. If it was on Vazinha alone, S+++ along with Orlando Hill. But it is teams we're ranking here and it's performances we're ranking here. They held off Argentina really well, and for that reason I'll put them in the high end of A tier. Not in S, but in the high end of A tier. Ghana. I feel like they promised a lot more than they gave, and getting grouped was a bit unfortunate. But I guess I fancied them to get a point against Croatia after they got one against us, and of course they beat Panama. So they had the chances, but they just didn't succeed. Curacao, the fact that they managed to get a point, unbelievable. A point against Ecuador, an actual point against Ecuador, impressive. Ecuador got humiliated when you got a point against them. You were literally the lowest level team in the entire tournament that barely anybody fancied, and you managed to do that. But still, I guess where did I really expect them to do? I'll put them in B. Be nice. Haiti. I feel like C because they got absolutely pummeled by every team they came up against. But I don't think we expected much of them either, so I'm not going to put them in D. Same with New Zealand, for the exact same reason. Bosnia, the fact that they got out of the group was, I guess, a bit impressive. They had some shaky moments. I'll put them in B. They had a decent squad. They had a rather decent squad, man. Up next, we have Sweden. Now, they were drew against France. Some would say it's unfair, but the actual game that they had against the Netherlands, I think, really sums up their tournament. They were rocky when they weren't up against teams that they were well better than. I feel like that just shows that they're not quite at that level yet. They've not been able to gel, especially with the brilliant team they have coming along with the likes of Bergvall and Victor Gyökeres, even though he's debatable whether he's stunning at the moment, but I'll put him in C. I feel like they should have done a bit more, but then again, against France, it was a bit unfair. Right, Turkey, the first tournament in 24 years, and they do nothing. Last time they went into a tournament, they got third place. This time, last in the group, with Paraguay, the USA, and Australia. Turkey favourites over every single one of them, and they couldn't do a thing, except against the USA, where they managed to eke out a win. Czechia, I feel like their big players didn't show up, because they did have some names like Sufal and Soucek. Right, up next, DR Congo. I think the way that they got, and then to almost beat England, was impressive. And for a tournament that they don't very often play in, I feel like that's commendable, and I'll give them A. Up next, Iraq. 0 points in a group with Senegal, Norway and France, I guess is fair, but I'm surprised they didn't maybe eke out 1 point. I guess. I could put them in B, but I'm going to put them in C purely because another 0 pointer. Yeah, I'm going to put them on the... I'm going to put Jordan on the same level then. Right, that is the rankings that I have chosen. Now my question is, what do you think about them rankings? Do you think they're fair? Do you think they're not? I'd be curious to see what you think. To be honest, admittedly I didn't watch every game at the World Cup, but I watched as many as I could. I wasn't able to watch all the 3 AM kickoffs, but for the things I did see, this is my tier list. And that's pretty much it. So, thank you very much for watching this I Enjoy Stuff video. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Probably maybe with another football thing or something like that. Bye.